The penthouse glittered 40 stories above Milan, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting a constellation of city lights against the midnight sky. Viviana Marchetti tilted her phone, angling the camera to capture her face in the soft golden glow of designer lamps. Behind her, partially visible in the Baroque mirror that dominated the wall, stood Lorenzo Bellicourt, one of Italy's most feared mafia bosses, his shirt unbuttoned, his attention elsewhere. She pressed the capture button, smiled, posted. Within 3 minutes, the image had been shared 4,000 times. Within 10 minutes, entertainment accounts began reposting. Within an hour, headlines exploded across every gossip site in Europe. Mafia boss's secret affair exposed? Who is the mystery woman with Lorenzo Bellicourt? Wife humiliated as husband's mistress goes public. Viviana watched the numbers climb, her heart racing with vindication. She had won. Finally won. But 30 kilometers away, in a sprawling estate surrounded by ancient olive groves, Serafina Bellicourt sat in her private study, phone illuminated in her steady hand. She looked at the photo, at the woman's triumphant smile, at her husband's careless reflection, and instead of crying, instead of screaming, instead of doing anything the world expected, Serafina smiled, because Viviana Marchetti had just handed her exactly what she needed. Before we begin, thank you for spending a part of your day with me. Whether you're listening from home, work, during a drive, or before bed, I'm grateful you're here. Tonight's story is filled with betrayal, secrets, power, and a comeback no one saw coming. Please like, share, and subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from so I can see just how far across the world this story has reached. Now let's begin today's story. The notification had arrived at 11:47 p.m. Serafina had been reviewing quarterly reports from 3 of Lorenzo's legitimate businesses: the luxury hotel chain, the import company, the real estate holdings she had helped structure from nothing into a €2 billion empire. Her reading glasses sat perched on her nose, a cup of chamomile tea growing cold beside stacks of financial documents. Her phone buzzed, then again, then continuously, a relentless vibration that made her finally reach for it. The first message was from her younger sister, Juliana. "Sarah, don't look at social media. Call me, please." The second was from her mother. "Sweetheart, I'm coming over. Stay calm." The third was from a number she didn't recognize. Later she would learn it was a journalist who had somehow obtained her private contact. "Mrs. Bellicourt, would you like to comment on the photo currently circulating of your husband with another woman?" Serafina removed her glasses slowly. She opened Instagram, and there it was, Viviana Marchetti, a woman whose name Serafina had first heard whispered 18 months ago, a woman she had investigated quietly and thoroughly, a woman she had been waiting for, smiling into the camera with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won a war she didn't understand had barely begun. Lorenzo was visible in the background. Unmistakably him. The Bellicourt family crest was even visible on the mirror's frame, the same mirror that hung in the Milan penthouse, the one Lorenzo claimed he used only for business meetings. Serafina studied the image for a long moment. The comment section was already flooded. "His wife must be devastated. She's so much hotter than the wife, honestly. Imagine being humiliated like this publicly. I'd die. The wife probably knew. They always know. She should leave him immediately. This is what happens when you marry a mafia man, ladies." Serafina scrolled through hundreds of comments, her expression unchanging. Then she set the phone down. She picked up her tea, took a sip, and began to think. The thing about Serafina Bellicourt that no one understood, not the media, not the gossip columnists, not even her own husband most days, was that she had never been the naive trophy wife everyone assumed. She had met Lorenzo Bellicourt 12 years ago, when she was 20 years old and working as a junior financial analyst at a struggling firm in Naples. He had walked in to acquire the company, not because he wanted it, but because its owner owed his family a debt that could only be paid in blood or assets. Everyone in that room had cowered. Everyone except Serafina. She had looked at the terrifying man in the immaculate black suit and asked, calmly, whether he had reviewed the company's actual worth or simply accepted the inflated figures presented by her incompetent superiors. The room had gone silent. Lorenzo had stared at her for a long moment, those steel-gray eyes assessing, calculating, intrigued. "Show me," he had said. She had. Within 3 hours, she had demonstrated that the company was worth 60% less than claimed, that its primary assets were leveraged against debts that hadn't been disclosed, and that acquiring it would actually cost the Bellecourt family money rather than generate it. Lorenzo had walked away from the deal, but not from her. 6 months later, they were married. Not because he had swept her off her feet with romance, though he had tried. Not because she was dazzled by his wealth or power, though both were considerable. But because she had recognized something in him that he barely recognized in himself. A man capable of building legitimate empires, of becoming something more than the violence of his birthright, of creating a legacy that didn't require blood. She had spent 12 years helping him build that legacy. The hotels, the import business, the real estate holdings, the charitable foundation that funded education in impoverished communities across southern Italy. Every structure, every strategy, every successful negotiation. Her fingerprints were on all of it. But Lorenzo had stopped seeing her work years ago. He saw only what everyone else saw. A beautiful wife who hosted charity galas, who smiled appropriately at events, who maintained the perfect image of Bellecourt respectability while he handled the real business. He had forgotten who she really was. Viviana Marchetti had never known at all. And that was going to be the most costly mistake either of them had ever made. Across the city, in the Milan penthouse, Lorenzo Bellecourt's phone began ringing at 12:03 a.m. He was in the bathroom, washing his face, trying to clear the fog of too much whiskey and a meeting that had gone on hours longer than planned. Viviana had left 20 minutes ago. She always left quickly, never wanting to overstay, always maintaining the illusion that their arrangement was casual, mutual, meaningless. Marco Vitali's name flashed on the screen. Lorenzo answered on the third ring. "This better be important." "Boss." Marco's voice was strained. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that's currently trending #1 in Italy." Lorenzo's hand stilled on the towel. "Explain." "The Marchetti woman. She posted a photo. Tonight. You're in it. The background. Everyone can see it's the penthouse." For 3 full seconds, Lorenzo didn't speak. Then, "Send it to me." The image arrived. He stared at it. At Viviana's satisfied smile. At his own reflection, careless and damning. At the Bellecourt crest visible on the mirror behind them both. How many people have seen this? As of 2 minutes ago? 4 million. The number is climbing every second. Lorenzo closed his eyes. "Where is my wife?" "At the estate. She hasn't made any public statements. Her phone appears to be on, but she hasn't responded to any media requests." "Get the car. Now." "Boss. I don't think going there tonight is." "Now, Marco." The drive from Milan to the Bellecourt estate typically took 45 minutes. Lorenzo's driver made it in 28. The entire way, Lorenzo's phone buzzed with messages, calls, notifications. His PR team, his lawyers, his associates, his mother, business partners, rivals pretending concern while measuring weakness. He ignored all of them. His mind was fixed on a single image. Serafina's face. He had expected to feel guilty about the affair. He had told himself he would, eventually, when he allowed himself to think about it. But the truth was that he had stopped allowing himself to think about his wife in any meaningful way years ago. She was simply there. A constant presence. Reliable. Steady. The woman who managed his household, who appeared on his arm at events, who slept in the bedroom down the hall from his office and never complained about the hours he kept. He couldn't remember the last time they had eaten dinner together. Couldn't remember the last time he had asked about her day. Couldn't remember the last time he had looked at her, truly looked at her, and seen the woman he had married rather than the role she performed. The affair with Viviana had begun 8 months ago, at a charity gala Serafina had organized. Viviana had been a guest, a social media influencer with connections to several families in their circle. She had approached him directly, boldly. with a confidence that felt exciting after years of everyone treating him with either fear or calculated deference. She made him feel desired, pursued, wanted for something beyond his power or his money or his name. He had told himself it was meaningless. He had told himself Serafina would never know. He had told himself that this was simply what men in his position did, that it changed nothing about his marriage, his family, his responsibilities. But now, watching the lights of his estate grow closer through the car window, Lorenzo felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Fear. Not of enemies or rivals or the dangers that came with his position, but of his wife, of what he might see in her eyes when she looked at him, of the possibility that he had destroyed something he was only now beginning to realize he couldn't live without. The estate was quiet when Lorenzo arrived. Too quiet. The main house, a sprawling Renaissance-era villa that had been in the Bellecourt family for 6 generations, showed only a single light burning in the west wing. Serafina's study. Lorenzo dismissed his driver and walked through the gardens alone, his footsteps echoing on ancient stone paths lined with roses his wife had planted their first year of marriage. She had been so young then, so bright with hope and plans and visions of what they would build together. When had he stopped listening to her plans? When had she stopped sharing them? He entered through the kitchen, servant's entrance, avoiding the main hall where security cameras recorded everything, and made his way through the darkened house toward the sliver of light escaping from beneath her study door. He paused outside, raised his hand to knock, then stopped. Through the heavy wooden door, he heard her voice. She was on the phone. "No, I'm not going to make a statement tonight. I need 48 hours minimum before any public response. Yes, I'm aware of the numbers. That's precisely why timing matters." "No, absolutely not. If anyone from the legal team contacts the platform directly, it will look like we're trying to suppress the image. That gives it more power, not less. I understand. Start preparing the dossier. I want everything we have on her financial records, her business partnerships, and especially the Fontaine investment. Yes, the one that doesn't add up. I want to know where that money actually came from." Lorenzo's breath caught. The Fontaine investment. He recognized that name. It was one of Viviana's supposedly independent business ventures. A boutique hotel she had told him she'd built herself, proof of her ambition and capability, separate from any family money or connections. What did Serafina know about it? What didn't he know about it? He pushed open the door. Serafina looked up from her desk. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Lorenzo saw something he hadn't seen in his wife's gaze for years. Not hurt, not despair. Not the broken devastation he had expected, even shamefully prepared defenses against. Instead, he saw calculation, strategy, and beneath it all, buried so deep that someone who didn't know her might miss it entirely, a cold and patient fury that made his blood run cold. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, never breaking eye contact with her husband. Something just came up. The silence stretched between them like a blade. Lorenzo stood in the doorway of her study, a room he hadn't entered in months, maybe longer, and truly looked at his wife for the first time in years. She was beautiful. He had always known that, abstractly, the way one knows the sky is blue or the sea is deep. But standing here now, watching her close a leather folder with movements as precise and unhurried as a surgeon's, he saw her beauty differently. It wasn't soft. It wasn't yielding. It was the beauty of a weapon perfectly maintained. Serafina wore simple silk pajamas, cream-colored, elegant even in their casualness. Her dark hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders. Her face was bare of makeup, revealing the natural warmth of her olive complexion, the intelligence in her hazel eyes. She looked like a woman who had been interrupted during important work, not like a woman whose marriage had just been publicly detonated. "Serafina, Sir Down Lorenzo." Her voice was calm, pleasant even, the same tone she used when directing household staff or managing difficult charity board members. Terrified him. He sat. She remained standing, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens, her back to him. "How long?" she asked. 8 months. "Do you love her?" The question hung in the air. "No." "Then why?" Lorenzo searched for words, explanations, the justifications he had built so carefully in his own mind. But standing in this room, facing the reality of what he had done, every excuse crumbled to ash. "I don't know," he said finally. Truthfully, "I don't know." Serafina turned. Her expression hadn't changed. "Interesting," she said. "You risk 12 years of marriage, your family's reputation, your business relationships, and your political alliances for a woman you don't love, for reasons you can't articulate. Is that accurate? Sarah, is that accurate?" "Yes." She nodded slowly, as if he had confirmed a hypothesis she had already formed. "Tell me about the Fontaine investment." The shift in topic caught him off guard. "What?" "Viviana's hotel project. The boutique property in Monaco. She told you she built it independently, yes? Proof of her business acumen, her sophistication, her capability as something more than just a beautiful woman seeking your attention." Lorenzo frowned. "How do you know about that?" "Answer the question." "Yes." She said she built it from her family's modest seed money, turned a small inheritance into a profitable luxury property. Serafina laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh, or a bitter one. It was the laugh of a teacher watching a student finally arrive at an obvious conclusion. "Lorenzo," she said almost gently, "that woman hasn't built anything in her life except follower counts. The Fontaine Hotel was purchased with money laundered through 3 shell companies. Money that originated from Damiano Ferraro's operations in southern France. The name hit Lorenzo like a physical blow. Damiano Ferraro, his oldest rival. The man who had spent 2 decades trying to undermine Bellecourt operations, who had put 3 of Lorenzo's men in the ground, who had been searching for any weakness, any leverage, any weapon to use against the Bellecourt family. "That's not possible. I have documentation going back 14 months. Would you like to see it?" Lorenzo stared at his wife. "You've been investigating her." "I've been investigating everything," Serafina corrected. "That's what I do. That's what I've always done." "Did you really think I spent 12 years in this marriage without learning how to protect myself?" "Protect yourself from what?" "From exactly this moment." She gestured toward the window, toward the world beyond it where the scandal was still exploding across every screen. "From the moment when your judgment failed and everything we built was threatened by your weakness." The word landed like a slap. "Weakness. Sarah, I'm not finished." She crossed the room to her desk, opened a drawer, retrieved a thick folder stuffed with documents, photographs, financial records. She placed it in front of him. "This is everything I have on Viviana Marchetti. Her real background, her actual financial situation, her connections to Ferraro, her previous relationships with powerful men. 3 before you, all of whom experienced significant business setbacks after their involvement with her became known." Lorenzo looked at the folder, then at his wife. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because tomorrow morning, that woman is going to wake up believing she has destroyed me. She's going to check her phone and see millions of comments celebrating her victory, mocking my humiliation, declaring her the winner of a competition I never agreed to enter." Serafina leaned forward, her palms flat on the desk. "She is going to believe that she has finally gotten what she wanted. And what does she want? To become me, to take my place, to be the legitimate wife of Lorenzo Bellecourt, with all the power and protection that position provides." Lorenzo shook his head. "I never would have married her." Serafina's smile was knife-sharp. "No, you wouldn't have, but you would have kept her close enough to damage everything else. Your reputation, your alliances, your family's legacy, and most importantly, your connection to your children." Lorenzo's blood went cold. "What does she know about the children?" "Nothing yet, but she's been asking subtle questions to people in our circle. Where the children attend school, what security measures we employ, whether they spend time at the Milan penthouse." Lorenzo was on his feet before he realized he had moved. "Where are Isabella and Marco?" "Exactly where they've been for the past 3 weeks with my mother in Sicily, where I sent them the moment I confirmed Viviana's connection to Ferraro." He stared at her. 3 weeks. I moved them quietly. No announcements. No changes to their official schedules. As far as anyone knows, they're still at their boarding school in Switzerland. But they're not. No. They're protected by 12 of my family's most trusted men, in a location known only to me and my mother. Lorenzo sank back into his chair. His wife had been protecting their children for weeks, had been investigating his mistress, had been preparing for exactly this scenario, and he had known nothing. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? That the woman you were sleeping with might be connected to your worst enemy? That your affair wasn't just a betrayal of your marriage, but potentially a security threat to your entire organization? Serafina shook her head. You weren't listening to me about quarterly reports, Lorenzo. You barely spoke to me about anything beyond schedules and events. What made you think you would listen to warnings about your mistress? He had no answer, because she was right. What happens now? Serafina moved to the window again, looking out at the darkness. Now, she said quietly, I do what I've always done. I protect this family. I protect your legacy. And I make certain that the woman who tried to destroy us destroys herself instead. How? She turned to face him, and for the first time, Lorenzo saw something vulnerable beneath her controlled exterior. Something wounded. Something human. I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. Later that evening, as Lorenzo sat alone in his study, the folder Serafina had given him spread across his desk. Marco Vitali appeared in the doorway. Boss, what is it? The PR team has been trying to reach you. They want to coordinate a response strategy. Tell them to stand down. Marco hesitated. Sir, the coverage is intensifying. Every major outlet is running the story. Social media engagement is approaching viral threshold for international coverage. If we don't get ahead of this, my wife is handling it. Marco's eyebrows rose. With respect, sir, I'm not sure this is the kind of situation that Serafina is handling it. The tone left no room for argument. Marco nodded slowly. Understood. Is there anything you need? Lorenzo looked down at the folder, at the photograph of Viviana Marchetti clipped to the first page. Not the selfie from tonight, but an older image. Surveillance footage. Viviana entering a restaurant in Nice, seated across from a silver-haired man whose cold eyes and dangerous smile were known throughout the Mediterranean underworld. Damiano Ferraro. I need everything we have on Ferraro's recent operations, Lorenzo said. Every movement, every transaction, every communication. If he's been planning something using Viviana as leverage, I want to know exactly what. That could take time. Ferraro's been quiet the past few months. Almost too quiet. Then find out why. Marco departed. Lorenzo continued reading. The documents Serafina had compiled were meticulous, comprehensive. Every financial trail traced, every connection mapped, every lie Viviana had told him systematically exposed. The Fontaine Hotel had been purchased with Ferraro money. That much was clear from the shell company structures. But the documentation went deeper. Viviana's entire lifestyle was funded through channels that led back to Ferraro's organization. Her apartment in Milan, her designer wardrobe, her social media presence, carefully cultivated to attract exactly the kind of attention that would bring her into Lorenzo's orbit. She had been planted. The affair hadn't been chance. It had been a weapon aimed at the heart of the Bellicourt family. And Lorenzo, arrogant, careless, distracted Lorenzo, had walked directly into it. He thought of Serafina, of the woman who had spent years warning him about security vulnerabilities, about enemies who worked through manipulation rather than violence, about the dangers of complacency. He had dismissed her concerns, had told her she was being paranoid, had stopped listening to her entirely. And now he was sitting in his study at 3 a.m., reading a dossier his wife had compiled while he was sleeping with the enemy, realizing that the woman he had overlooked for years was the only person capable of saving everything he had built. He needed a drink. He needed several drinks. But more than that, he needed to understand how he had become so blind. 3 days later, the scandal had evolved into something unprecedented. What had started as a single viral selfie had become a full-scale media circus. Paparazzi camped outside the Bellecourt estate gates. Entertainment programs ran hourly updates. Social media analysts appeared on talk shows to discuss engagement metrics and public sympathy. But the story wasn't playing out the way anyone expected. Viviana Marchetti had given 3 interviews in the 72 hours since posting the photo. Each time, she presented herself as a woman caught in an impossible situation. Not a homewrecker, but a romantic victim. A woman who had genuinely fallen for a man trapped in a loveless marriage. Lorenzo and Serafina have been living separate lives for years, she told one sympathetic entertainment host. Everyone in their circle knows it. I never intended to cause pain. I simply couldn't deny what was real. The audience had responded with hashtags of support. Hashtag Team Viviana began trending. Hashtag Free Lorenzo from his marriage gained traction. And hashtag Sad Wife Tropical Divorce. A cruel reference to rumors that Serafina would retreat to some tropical destination to hide from her humiliation. Reached the top 10. But Serafina didn't hide. She didn't retreat. She didn't release tearful statements or give wounded interviews. Instead, 72 hours after the photo went viral, she stepped out of the Bellecourt estate wearing a cream-colored Valentino coat and entered a chauffeured vehicle that drove her directly to the headquarters of Bellecourt Industries. The paparazzi followed, cameras flashing. Social media exploded with speculation. Is she going to confront him at work? Maybe she's filing for divorce? Someone said she's there to claim her share of the companies. Watch her embarrass herself in public. This is going to be amazing. What no one expected, what no one could have predicted, was what actually happened. Serafina walked into the Bellecourt Industries boardroom at 10 a.m. sharp, took her seat at the head of the table, and called to order a meeting of the company's senior leadership. Every person in that room, executives, division heads, legal advisors, stared at her with varying degrees of shock. "Good morning," Serafina said pleasantly. "I apologize for the unusual scheduling, but given recent events affecting the company's public image, I felt it necessary to review our strategic position." Alessia Romano, the head of public relations, was the first to find her voice. "Mrs. Bellecourt, with all due respect, these matters are typically handled by whom, Alessia? My husband, who is currently the source of our image problem. The legal team, whose first instinct was to suppress the photograph and thereby confirm its significance. Or perhaps the board members who have been fielding calls from nervous investors for 3 days while waiting for someone to demonstrate leadership." Silence. Serafina opened her leather portfolio. "I've prepared a strategic response plan that addresses both immediate public relations needs and underlying business vulnerabilities exposed by this situation. I'd like to walk through it now, unless there are objections." No one objected. For the next 2 hours, Serafina Bellecourt, the trophy wife, the silent partner, the woman everyone assumed was crying alone in her bedroom, systematically demonstrated that she understood Bellecourt Industries better than half the people paid to run it. She identified 3 business relationships that were vulnerable to scandal-based erosion. She proposed preemptive communication strategies for each. She outlined a charitable initiative that would redirect media attention toward the company's community impact rather than its CEO's personal life. And she presented evidence, carefully curated evidence, that certain recent business disruptions were not coincidental but appeared coordinated. "Someone is using this situation to attack us," she concluded. The selfie wasn't just personal humiliation. It was a tactical first strike. "What kind of attack?" one board member asked. "We've lost 2 supplier contracts this week." Both companies cited reputational concerns as their reason for withdrawal. Both companies have recently begun new partnerships with organizations connected to the Ferraro family. The name landed like a bomb. Every person in that room knew Damiano Ferraro. Every person in that room understood what his involvement meant. "Are you saying Ferraro orchestrated this?" Alessia demanded. "I'm saying that the timing is suspicious, the beneficiaries are consistent, and we would be foolish not to investigate the connection." She closed her portfolio. "Gentlemen, ladies, you may view me as simply Lorenzo's wife. You may believe my role in this organization is decorative. But I helped build the legitimate foundation of every business in this room. and I will not watch it be destroyed by enemies who think we are too distracted to notice their attack. She stood. You can coordinate with me or continue waiting for my husband to emerge from whatever guilt spiral he's currently occupying. The choice is yours. But I would remind you that I am the largest individual shareholder after Lorenzo himself, and my vote carries significant weight in any decisions that require board approval. The room was silent. Serafina walked out. The moment the door closed behind her, Alessia reached for her phone. She had a call to make. Across the city, in her penthouse apartment, Viviana Marchetti scrolled through the coverage of Serafina's appearance at Bellecourt Industries with growing unease. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The wife was supposed to crumble, to hide, to make tearful statements that turned public sympathy even more firmly against her. Instead, Serafina looked powerful. The photos from today showed a woman in complete control. No tears, no visible devastation, just elegant professionalism and what appeared to be actual competence. The comments were shifting. Okay, but she actually looks amazing? That coat. She walked in there and took charge. Queen behavior, honestly. Wait, she's a shareholder? I thought she was just the wife. Maybe SHE should be running the company instead of the cheating husband. Viviana closed the app with more force than necessary. This was supposed to destroy Serafina. This was supposed to position Viviana as the sympathetic alternative. This was supposed to make Lorenzo realize that his wife was weak and his mistress was his true partner. Instead, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Hello, Ms. Marchetti. The voice was male, cold, familiar. We need to talk. Mr. Ferraro. I wasn't expecting. You've seen today's coverage. I have. Then you understand we have a problem. The wife was supposed to be neutralized by now. Instead, she's rallying support and raising questions about coordination against Bellecourt interests. She doesn't know anything. She's guessing. She's not guessing. Ferraro's tone sharpened. She named our family directly in a board meeting. She's connected the supplier withdrawals to our operations. Someone has given her information she shouldn't have. Viviana felt a chill crawl down her spine. That's not possible. Lorenzo doesn't share business details with her. Then find out where she's getting her intelligence. And accelerate the timeline. I want Bellecourt's reputation destroyed completely within the next 2 weeks. Every business partner questioning his judgment. Every investor nervous about instability. Every alliance he's built weakened enough for us to exploit. And if Serafina keeps fighting back? A long pause. Then we'll have to neutralize her more directly. The call ended. Viviana stared at her phone. When Damiano Ferraro had first approached her, 18 months ago at a party in Monaco, he had presented the opportunity as elegant, sophisticated, a long game that would bring down the Bellecourt empire through strategic humiliation rather than violence. She would get close to Lorenzo. She would make him fall for her. She would be positioned as his new partner when his marriage inevitably crumbled. And Ferraro would get what he wanted. Access to Bellecourt business intelligence, leverage over Lorenzo's decisions, and eventually, control over the legitimate enterprises that would be far more valuable than any criminal operation. It had seemed perfect. Viviana would become one of the most powerful women in Italy. Lorenzo would have a more suitable partner. And Serafina, boring, quiet, overlooked Serafina, would fade into irrelevance. But the woman on the news today wasn't fading. She was growing stronger, and Ferraro's patience was running out. Viviana reached for her laptop. She needed to find something, anything that could be used against Serafina. Something personal. Something devastating. Something that would remind the world that the wife was the victim, not the victor. The next morning, Lorenzo Bellecourt arrived at his office to find Marco Vitali waiting with an expression that suggested more bad news. What now? 2 more supplier contracts pulled. Also, your 11 o'clock called to reschedule indefinitely. Which 11 o'clock? The minister. Lorenzo closed his eyes. The minister, a carefully cultivated government contact who provided advance warning about regulatory changes affecting Bellecourt interests, had been an ally for 7 years. Did he give a reason? His assistant said scheduling conflicts, but I heard from our contact in his office that he's concerned about association with the scandal. Apparently there are questions being raised about his past attendance at Bellecourt events. Questions from who? Unknown. But the framing suggests someone is actively working to isolate you from political protection. Ferraro. It had to be. Lorenzo thought about everything Serafina had shown him, the connections, the money trails, the systematic nature of the attack. This wasn't just a personal scandal anymore. This was war. And he had been so distracted by guilt, so consumed by the immediate crisis, that he had nearly missed the larger strategy being deployed against everything he had built. Where's my wife? Mrs. Bellecourt left the estate early this morning. She didn't inform security of her destination. Lorenzo frowned. She didn't tell security where she was going? No, sir. She took one of the secondary vehicles and departed through the service entrance. Our people lost her in city traffic near the fashion district. The fashion district. What business would Serafina have there? Unless Lorenzo reached for his phone. Before he could dial, Alessia Romano appeared in his doorway. Sir, we have a situation. What kind of situation? Viviana Marchetti is holding a press conference in 40 minutes. She's announced that she has significant revelations about your marriage that the public deserves to know. Lorenzo's blood ran cold. What revelations? We don't know yet, but her representatives have been hinting at financial impropriety, hidden assets, and questions about your wife's involvement in certain business decisions that may not have been entirely legal. That's ridiculous. Serafina has never. I'm just telling you what they're saying, sir. The preview coverage is already positioning this as the Mistress strikes back against the wife's corporate power play yesterday. Lorenzo looked at Marco. Find my wife. Now, she needs to know about this before it happens. What are you going to do? Lorenzo was already reaching for his jacket. I'm going to that press conference. Viviana Marchetti stood before a wall of cameras, microphones bristling like weapons, lights hot against her carefully made-up face. She had spent 3 hours preparing for this moment. Her hair was perfect. Her dress was elegant but appropriately modest. Her expression was the practiced mixture of vulnerability and strength that her media consultant had helped her develop. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice steady. I know the past few days have been intense for everyone involved, and I've tried to remain silent, to let the situation speak for itself, to avoid adding fuel to what has already been a difficult fire. She paused, allowing the cameras to capture her emotional struggle. But I can no longer remain silent while Serafina Bellecourt uses her position to destroy my reputation and obscure the truth about her own actions. The room buzzed. I have evidence, Viviana continued, that Serafina Bellecourt has been systematically involved in. The doors at the back of the room opened. Every head turned. Lorenzo Bellecourt walked in. Viviana's prepared speech died in her throat. He wasn't supposed to be here. He had been ignoring her calls for days. He had made no public statements. He wasn't supposed to be here. But there he was, 6 feet 4 inches of barely contained fury in a perfectly tailored black suit, walking down the center aisle like he owned the room. Because he did. Lorenzo, don't. The single word silenced her. Silenced the entire room. Lorenzo stopped 3 feet from the podium, his steel-gray eyes fixed on Viviana with an intensity that made several reporters instinctively step back. You wanted public attention, he said, his voice carrying clearly to every microphone. Congratulations. You have it. Lorenzo, please. This isn't. Tell them about Damiano Ferraro. The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Tell them about the Fontaine Hotel, Lorenzo continued. Tell them about the 3 shell companies used to funnel money into your accounts. Tell them about your meetings in Nice. Tell them about the €2 million payment you received 4 months ago, the same week you arranged to accidentally meet me at the Milano charity gala my wife organized. Viviana's face went white. That's not. I have documentation, bank records, photographs, communications between you and Ferraro's associates that make clear this entire affair was engineered to compromise my organization. The cameras were going wild. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Viviana looked desperately for an escape, but Lorenzo stepped closer, blocking her path. "You thought my wife was your target," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "You thought she was weak, passive, easily defeated. But everything you believed you knew about Serafina Bellecourt, everything Ferraro told you about her, was wrong. I don't. She found you. She documented you. She has been 3 steps ahead of you from the moment you posted that photograph." Lorenzo leaned in. "And whatever you were about to say about her, whatever evidence you manufactured, I promise you, she has already prepared the counter. The only question is how much of yourself you want to destroy before you realize you've already lost." Viviana's composure shattered. "You can't do this. Ferraro will." She stopped. Too late. The name had been said clearly, into a microphone, in front of dozens of witnesses. Lorenzo turned to face the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this interruption, but I believe Ms. Marchetti has just confirmed what my legal team will be presenting to authorities this afternoon. That her relationship with me was part of a coordinated effort by Damiano Ferraro to destabilize my family and my businesses." He straightened his jacket. "My wife will be making a formal statement this evening regarding her own evidence against the parties involved. I suggest you clear your schedules." He walked out. The room exploded. 3 hours later, Serafina Bellecourt stood in her private study, watching the chaos unfold on multiple screens. Every news channel was running the footage from Viviana's disastrous press conference. Every analysis focused on Lorenzo's surprise appearance and damning accusations. Every commentator was asking the same questions. Who was Damiano Ferraro? What was his connection to the Mistress? And what did Serafina Bellecourt know? The narrative had shifted. Viviana was no longer the sympathetic other woman. She was potentially a criminal conspirator. And Serafina, patient, strategic, underestimated Serafina, had orchestrated the entire reversal without ever appearing publicly. But she didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired. Tired of 12 years of being overlooked. Tired of building an empire while receiving no credit. Tired of loving a man who had stopped seeing her. Tired of fighting battles that shouldn't exist because her husband couldn't keep his attention where it belonged. The door opened behind her. "Lorenzo." She didn't turn. "The press is calling it a masterpiece," he said quietly. "Complete reversal of public sympathy. Viviana's representatives are already trying to distance themselves. Ferraro's lawyers have issued a statement denying any involvement. I know. Sarah, I've made a decision." He fell silent. Serafina finally turned to face him. "You destroyed everything yourself at that press conference. You exposed Viviana. You confirmed Ferraro's involvement. You created a scandal so large that it overwhelmed the original scandal entirely. I was protecting you." "No." Her voice was sharp. "You were protecting yourself. Your reputation. Your businesses. Your legacy. Just like you've always done." Lorenzo stared at her. "That's not. I needed one thing from you, Lorenzo. One thing. For 12 years, I needed you to see me. Not the wife. Not the hostess. Not the silent partner who built your legitimate empire while you played at being a dangerous man. Just me." Her voice cracked. "Just barely. And instead, you saw her. Serafina, I made a mistake. You made a choice. Every day for 8 months you made a choice. To go to that penthouse. To spend time with that woman. To invest emotional energy in someone who saw you as a target while your actual wife was identifying threats, protecting your children, and preparing for exactly this disaster." She picked up a folder from her desk. The same folder she had shown him 3 days ago. "This took me 14 months to compile. 14 months of quietly building intelligence on a woman I suspected from the first moment I heard her name. Do you want to know why I suspected her?" Lorenzo didn't answer. "Because she approached you at an event I organized. Because she expressed interest in exactly the things that would appeal to your ego. Because she was too perfect, too available, too convenient." Serafina shook her head. "And you, the man who has survived assassination attempts, who built a criminal empire, who can supposedly see betrayal coming from kilometers away. You saw nothing. I was blind. Yes, you were. Because you wanted to be. Because admitting that your middle-aged affair was a transparent honeypot operation would have meant admitting that you're not as perceptive as you believe. Lorenzo moved toward her. She stepped back. Sarah, please. I need time. How much time? I don't know. He stopped. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the sound of news coverage playing softly from the screens behind them. I'm leaving tonight, Serafina said finally. I have preparations to complete for my public statement, and I need to be somewhere you are not when I do it. Where will you go? Does it matter? The question hit him like a physical blow, because she was right. It hadn't mattered to him, not for years, where she went, what she did, who she spent time with, what occupied her thoughts and her hours and her heart. He had stopped caring. He had stopped asking. He had stopped seeing her as a person who existed outside of her utility to his image and his household. And now she was walking out the door, and he had absolutely no idea how to stop her. The helicopter lifted off from the Bellecourt estate at 9:47 p.m., carrying Serafina toward an unknown destination, while Lorenzo watched from the window of his study. He had considered following her, had considered demanding that security track her location, had considered using every resource at his disposal to make certain she couldn't simply disappear. But something in her eyes, that exhausted, wounded, resolute look, had stopped him. She needed space. She needed to not be his wife for a while. And if he truly wanted any chance of repairing what he had destroyed, he needed to let her have that. Marco appeared in the doorway. Boss, Ferraro's people have made contact. Lorenzo turned. What do they want? A meeting. Tonight. Neutral location. After what happened at the press conference? They're saying it's urgent. Something about mutual interests that supersede personal disagreements. Lorenzo considered. Ferraro reaching out directly, immediately after being publicly named, suggested either desperation or confidence. Neither option was good. Set it up, but full security protocol. And I want 3 separate exit strategies in place before I set foot in that room. Marco nodded and departed. Lorenzo returned his gaze to the sky where the helicopter had disappeared. Serafina was out there somewhere, alone, preparing a statement that would either save their family or destroy it. And he had no idea what she was going to say. For the first time in 20 years, Lorenzo Bellecourt had absolutely no control over his own fate. And the woman who held it in her hands was someone he barely knew anymore. Hours earlier, before departing the estate, Serafina had made one final call. Not to her lawyers, not to her media contacts, not to any of the strategic resources she had carefully cultivated over 12 years. She had called her mother-in-law. Lucia Bellecourt answered on the second ring. Serafina, I've been watching the coverage. Then you know what's happening. I know what the cameras show. I want to know what they don't. Serafina sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. He's been having an affair, for 8 months, with a woman planted by Damiano Ferraro as part of a coordinated attack on the family. Silence. Then, you discovered this yourself. Yes. And you've been preparing a response for how long? 14 months. Since I first suspected her involvement. Another silence. You never told my son. He wasn't listening. No. Lucia's voice carried old pain. He never does. Not to the women who love him. It was the same with his father. The Bellecourt men see threats everywhere except in their own hearts. Serafina felt tears prick at her eyes. She fought them down. I don't know what to do, Lucia. I've prepared the strategic response. I've positioned the evidence. I've orchestrated the reversal that protects the family and the businesses. But when I think about actually continuing this marriage, you're not certain you want to. I'm not certain I can. The line was quiet for a moment. Come to me, Lucia said finally. Tonight, the children are here. You should be with them while you make this decision. Lorenzo will try to find me. Then I will tell him exactly what I told his father when he made the same mistakes. that he is not entitled to his wife's presence simply because it would make him feel better. Serafina almost laughed. Almost. Thank you, Lucia. Thank me by surviving this with your dignity intact. Whatever you decide about my son, you are Bellecourt. You have proven that more thoroughly than anyone alive. And I will support whatever choice you make. The call ended. And for the first time since seeing that photograph 3 days ago, Serafina allowed herself to cry. Later that evening, as Serafina's helicopter carried her towards Sicily, as Lorenzo prepared to meet with his oldest enemy, as Viviana Marchetti frantically tried to reach Damiano Ferraro's people for guidance, a different conversation was taking place in a secure location 300 kilometers from Milan. Damiano Ferraro sat across from a woman he had never expected to see again. "Mrs. Bellecourt," he said, raising his glass. "This is unexpected." But the woman facing him wasn't Serafina. She was older, silver-haired, sharp-eyed. Lucia Bellecourt regarded him with the cold assessment of a woman who had survived 3 generations of Mafia conflict. "Mr. Ferraro, I believe we have matters to discuss." "Do we?" "You've overplayed your hand. The mistress has been exposed. My son is aware of your involvement. Within 48 hours, authorities will receive evidence linking your operations to the attack on Bellecourt interests." Ferraro's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "That sounds like a threat. It sounds like reality." Lucia set down her own glass. "I have no interest in continuing this conflict. It has cost both our families too much. But my daughter-in-law has prepared a weapon that will destroy you completely, and she is currently in possession of the trigger." "Then why are you here instead of her?" "Because Serafina wants justice. And justice, in this context, means your complete destruction." Lucia leaned forward. "I want peace, and peace requires negotiation." Ferraro studied her for a long moment. "What are you proposing?" "Complete withdrawal from Bellecourt territories. An end to all operations targeting our interests. And the Marchetti woman. What about her? Deliver her to the authorities yourself. Publicly distance your organization from her actions. Accept responsibility for her involvement. That would mean admitting. It would mean surviving." Lucia's voice was ice. "Because the alternative is what Serafina has planned. And believe me, Mr. Ferraro, when that woman decides to destroy someone, she does not leave pieces large enough to rebuild." Silence stretched between them. Ferraro's jaw tightened. "And if I accept these terms? Then the evidence stops with Viviana. Your organization continues to operate in your existing territories. And this conflict ends. Your son won't accept peace. He'll want revenge. My son will accept what I tell him to accept. Because I am still the matriarch of this family, and he has just been publicly humiliated because he couldn't keep his attention on his own wife." Lucia smiled slightly. "He is not currently in a position to make demands." Ferraro considered. The offer was humiliating. The withdrawal would be seen as weakness by his allies. But the alternative? He had seen the documentation Serafina had compiled. Bank records, communications, photographs, enough to bring down not just his current operations but his entire organization. "I need time to consider." "You have until morning." Lucia stood. After that, Serafina makes her statement. The evidence goes public, and this conversation never happened. She walked toward the door, paused. "One more thing, Mr. Ferraro. If anything happens to my daughter-in-law, anything at all, the agreement is void and every piece of evidence releases automatically. She has made arrangements." "I don't doubt it." "Then we understand each other." She left. Ferraro remained seated, staring at the space where she had been. The Bellecourt family. For years, he had believed Lorenzo was the dangerous one, the young boss with the cold eyes and the reputation for decisive violence. But he had been wrong. The dangerous ones were the women, and he had just made the mistake of underestimating both of them. The morning sun rose over Sicily, painting the ancient stone walls of the Bellecourt family compound in shades of gold and rose. Serafina stood on the terrace overlooking the sea, her children still sleeping in rooms protected by a dozen armed guards and centuries of family loyalty. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lucia. It's done. Ferraro accepts. Viviana will be delivered to authorities by noon. Formal withdrawal begins immediately. She read it twice. Felt nothing. The victory she had engineered, the complete destruction of the woman who had tried to destroy her, should have felt satisfying. Instead, she felt empty, because the mistress was gone. The enemy was defeated. The scandal would fade. But her marriage was still broken, and she had no idea if she wanted to fix it. Across the water, in a small fishing village on the mainland, Lorenzo Bellicourt's meeting with Ferraro had ended very differently than expected. He had arrived prepared for confrontation, had been told, instead, that there would be no fight. Ferraro was withdrawing. Viviana was being surrendered. The conflict was over. Lorenzo had demanded to know why. Ferraro had smiled. Ask your mother. Now, standing on the deck of a boat hired to avoid surveillance, Lorenzo called the number he should have called first. Lucia answered immediately. Lorenzo, what did you do? What you should have done years ago. I protected this family while you were distracted by your own weakness. Mother. No. You listen to me. Your wife has spent 12 years building everything you take credit for. She identified the threat. She compiled the evidence. She orchestrated the reversal. And when victory was within reach, she was prepared to destroy Ferraro completely. Prepared. I negotiated peace instead. Because complete destruction creates blood feuds that last generations. And I will not leave that legacy to your children. Lorenzo closed his eyes. Where is she? Here. With me. With the children. I'm coming. You will do no such thing. Lucia's voice was steel. She asked for space. You will give it to her. When she is ready to speak with you. If she decides she wants to, she will contact you. This is my family. This is her decision. You forfeited the right to demand anything when you spent 8 months sleeping with a woman who was actively trying to destroy her. The words hit like physical blows. Because they were true. All of it was true. What do I do? You wait. Lucia's voice softened slightly. And you prove, not with words, but with actions, that you are capable of being the man she thought she married. The call ended. Lorenzo stood alone on the deck of the boat, watching the sun rise over water that suddenly felt like an uncrossable distance between himself and everything he had lost. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence from Serafina. 3 days of Lorenzo trying to focus on the business aftermath while his mind remained fixed on a woman who wouldn't answer his calls. The media narrative had shifted completely. Viviana Marchetti had been arrested on charges related to financial fraud and conspiracy. Her connection to Ferraro was being examined by multiple agencies. The selfie that had started everything was being reframed as evidence of a sophisticated honeypot operation. And Serafina Bellicourt, the wife everyone had expected to crumble, was being hailed as a strategic genius. Opinion pieces praised her composure. Social media celebrated her comeback. Business analysts noted the stabilization of Bellicourt stock prices following her public statements. #SerafinaStrong trended worldwide. But the woman at the center of it all remained invisible, unreachable, silent, until the morning of the 4th day. Lorenzo received a message from an unknown number. One line, one location, the chapel. This evening. Come alone. He recognized the location immediately. The small chapel on the Bellicourt estate where they had been married 12 years ago. She was coming home. And whatever happened next would determine whether they had a future, or only a past. The evening light filtered through ancient stained glass, casting patterns of color across worn stone floors. Lorenzo arrived first. He stood before the altar where he had made vows he had failed to keep, and waited. Minutes passed. Then, the heavy wooden doors opened, and Serafina walked in. She was alone. She was beautiful, and the expression on her face was one he couldn't read. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You knew I would." "Yes, I did." She walked slowly down the aisle, her heels echoing in the empty space. "I've spent 4 days thinking about what I want to say to you, and I've decided that words are insufficient." She stopped 3 feet from him. close enough to touch, miles away. You broke something, Lorenzo. Not just trust, not just vows. You broke the foundation of everything I believed about us. I know. For 12 years, I told myself that your distance was temporary, that the work demanded your attention, that once the empire was stable, once the threats were managed, once the children were older, you would come back to me. She shook her head. But you weren't coming back. You were leaving. Slowly. Invisibly. One ignored conversation at a time. One canceled dinner at a time. One night in a separate bedroom at a time. Sarah, let me finish. He fell silent. I can survive without you. I proved that to myself over the past week. I protected our children. I outmaneuvered our enemies. I saved your businesses, your reputation, your family name, all without your help. She stepped closer. I don't need you, Lorenzo. I haven't needed you for years. The words landed like a death sentence. But I wanted you. I wanted the man I married. The man who looked at me like I was the most fascinating person in any room. The man who asked my opinion and actually listened to the answer. The man who chose me. Not because I was useful or appropriate or strategically advantageous, but because he couldn't imagine his life without me. Her eyes glistened. I don't know where that man went. I don't know if he still exists. And I don't know if I have the strength to search for him anymore. Lorenzo felt something crack inside his chest. He's here. Is he? I've been blind, arrogant, stupid in ways I can't explain or excuse. But I have spent the past week understanding, truly understanding, what I almost destroyed. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. You built everything, he said quietly. Not just the businesses, the home, the family, the life that gave my work meaning. I took all of it for granted because I assumed it would always be there. That you would always be there. I almost wasn't. I know. They stood in silence for a long moment. The light through the windows had shifted, painting them both in shades of amber and rose. I don't know how to fix this, Lorenzo admitted. I don't know if it can be fixed. But I know that I'm not willing to walk away without trying. What would you do differently? Everything. His grip on her hand tightened. I would see you. Every day. I would listen to you. Every conversation. I would remind myself, every morning when I wake up and every night before I sleep, that the woman beside me is not decoration or support or background. She is my partner. My equal. The most capable person I have ever known. Words are easy, Lorenzo. Then let me show you. One day at a time. For as long as it takes. Serafina studied his face, searching for something. He didn't know if she found it. But when she spoke again, her voice had changed. Softer. Still wounded. But something else too. Something like the first crack of light through winter clouds. I'm going to stay in Sicily for another week. With the children. With your mother. I need more time. I understand. When I come back, things will be different. We will be different. If you can't accept that, I will accept anything you need. Even if it means starting over completely. No assumptions. No entitlement. No things going back to normal. Because normal is what got us here. Even that. She nodded slowly. Then, before he could move or speak or breathe, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his cheek. Brief. Gentle. A whisper of what they had once been. 1 week, she said, pulling back. And then we'll see. She turned and walked toward the doors. Lorenzo watched her go. At the threshold, she paused. Lorenzo. Yes. The next time a beautiful woman approaches you at an event I organized. I know. Do you? He met her eyes across the length of the chapel. I will walk away. I will come find you. And I will remember that the most dangerous woman in any room is always the one I'm married to. For the first time in 4 days, Serafina smiled. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something. A beginning. Possibility. A crack in the wall she had built around her heart. And as she disappeared through the doors, Lorenzo sank into the nearest pew and allowed himself to feel something he hadn't experienced since the night the photograph went viral. Hope. 1 week later, The helicopter touched down on the Bellecourt estate lawn at 3:47 p.m. Lorenzo was waiting. He had spent the past 7 days transforming himself in ways no one would have believed possible. He had canceled 12 business meetings. He had personally reviewed every document Serafina had compiled about Viviana and Ferraro, actually reading her strategic analysis rather than skimming it. He had spent 4 hours with his daughter, Isabella, listening to her talk about her studies and her friends and her fears about the future. He had spent 3 hours with his son, Marco, teaching him chess, badly because Lorenzo hadn't played in years, and answering questions about what it meant to be a man. He had called his mother every evening. He had read 4 books Serafina had recommended years ago that he had never touched. He had started seeing a therapist, the first Bellecourt in 4 generations to seek that kind of help. And he had prepared something. Now, as Serafina descended from the helicopter, elegant in a cream dress, her dark hair lifting in the rotor wash, their children following behind, he stepped forward. "Welcome home." She looked at him, really looked. Something had shifted in his posture, his eyes, the way he held himself. "You look different," she said. "I'm trying to be." Isabella and Marco ran past them toward the house, excited to be home, already arguing about who got the better bedroom. Lorenzo and Serafina stood alone on the lawn. "I want to show you something," he said. "If you're willing." "Now? Please." She considered, then nodded. He led her through the gardens, past the roses she had planted, past the fountain the children played in during summer, past the stone bench where they had once spent hours talking about dreams and plans and futures, to the edge of the property, where a new structure stood. Serafina stopped. It was a building she had described to him years ago, a design she had sketched on napkins and hotel stationery during the early days of their marriage. A combination home office and creative studio, space for her own work, separate from the demands of the main house. He had promised to build it for her. He had never followed through. Now it stood before her, completed. "Lorenzo, I found your original sketches in a box in the attic. I had architects work from them. They said the design was remarkably sophisticated for someone who wasn't trained." Serafina walked toward the building, touched the door, opened it. Inside, she found exactly what she had imagined 12 years ago. A workspace, a reading area, a small kitchen, windows overlooking the olive groves. Everything she had asked for, everything he had dismissed, everything he had finally built. "It took the full week," Lorenzo said from behind her. "I called in every favor I had to get the construction completed in time." She turned to face him. "Why?" "Because I realized that I had spent 12 years building an empire and never built you a single thing. Every structure, every achievement, every success, you helped create them for me. And I never asked what you wanted for yourself." His voice cracked. "I never asked. I just assumed you wanted what I wanted. I assumed your dreams were my dreams. I assumed that being my wife was enough to make you happy. It was. For a while. But not anymore." "No." She touched his face. "Not anymore." They stood in silence. The afternoon light shifted around them. "This is a start," Serafina said finally. "Not a solution. One building doesn't repair 12 years. I know. I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. I'm still not certain I can ever trust you the way I once did. I know. But I'm willing to try." She stepped closer. "On one condition. Anything. From this moment forward, we are partners. Actually equal. Not in theory, not in appearance, but in practice. My voice carries the same weight as yours. My decisions are not subject to your approval. My work is not secondary to your work. Yes. And if you ever betray this partnership again, you won't have to leave. I will." She studied him, seeing something new, something that might eventually become something real. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's go home." That evening, the Bellecourt family ate dinner together for the first time in months. Not in the formal dining room, not served by staff on china plates, but in the kitchen, around the old wooden table that had belonged to Lorenzo's grandmother. eating pasta that Serafina had made herself while the children argued about school and Lorenzo tried to remember the names of their friends. It was messy. It was imperfect. It was nothing like the polished image the world expected from Italy's most powerful mafia family. But it was real. And when Lorenzo looked across the table at his wife, laughing at something Marco had said, tomato sauce on her chin, more beautiful than any woman he had ever seen, he felt something shift inside him. Not quite healing. Not yet. But the beginning of it. The possibility. 6 months later, on a winter evening when snow fell softly over the Bellicourt estate, Lorenzo Bellicourt stood before his family and 300 guests in the great hall of their ancestral home. Serafina stood beside him. Not behind. Never behind again. When I married this woman 12 years ago, Lorenzo said, his voice carrying through the candlelit space, I believed I understood what I was getting. Partner. A helpmate. Someone who would support the work I was doing and raise the children I wanted. He paused. I was wrong. The room was silent. What I actually got was the most brilliant, capable, and formidable person I have ever known. A woman who built empires while I took credit. A woman who saw threats I missed. A woman who saved everything I cared about, including myself, when I was too blind to see I was destroying it. He turned to face her. I don't deserve a second chance. But I'm asking for one anyway. Not because of what I've done in the past 6 months. Anyone can behave well for 6 months. But because of what I intend to do for the rest of my life. He took her hand. Serafina Bellicourt, I am renewing my vows to you tonight. Not the vows of a young man who didn't understand what marriage meant, but the vows of a man who has learned the hard way that the most valuable thing he possesses is not his power or his empire or his reputation. His voice dropped. Intimate. Only for her. It's you. It has always been you. And I will spend every day I have left making certain you never doubt that again. Serafina looked at her husband. At the man who had broken her trust and spent 6 months rebuilding it. At the man who had seen therapists and canceled meetings and built her a studio and learned to cook. At the man who had finally started to see her. I accept, she said. And when they kissed, there in the great hall, before their children and their family and the 300 witnesses who would remember this night for the rest of their lives, it was a beginning, not an ending. A new story, written by 2 people who had finally learned to write it together. And somewhere in a prison cell in Rome, Viviana Marchetti watched the news coverage of the Bellicourt vow renewal ceremony with cold fury in her eyes. Her plan had failed. Her allies had abandoned her. Her future held nothing but courtrooms and consequences. But she still knew things. Things about Damiano Ferraro's remaining operations. Things about other families and their vulnerabilities. Things that might eventually become valuable to someone willing to trade. She smiled. This wasn't over. The Bellicourtes had won this battle. But battles weren't wars. And Viviana Marchetti had never been very good at accepting defeat. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the children had been sent to bed, Serafina and Lorenzo stood together on the balcony overlooking the snow-covered gardens. She's going to try again, Serafina said quietly. Viviana. She's not the type to accept this outcome. Let her try. You're not concerned? Lorenzo turned to face his wife. I spent 12 years underestimating the woman beside me. I'm not going to make the same mistake with a woman who already lost once. He pulled her closer. Whatever comes next, we face it together. As partners. Serafina leaned into him. Felt the warmth of his body against hers. Felt, for the first time in years, safe. Not because he would protect her, but because they would protect each other. Together, she agreed. The snow continued falling. The candles continued burning. And somewhere in the distance, church bells rang midnight, marking the beginning of a new day. A new chapter. A new story. Written not by scandal or betrayal or the schemes of enemies, but by 2 people who had finally remembered why they fell in love. And who had chosen, despite everything, to fall in love again. The end. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world. And remember, no matter how broken something seems, Redemption is always possible. For those who are willing to fight for it. Until next time.